Thanks for joining us for Kitchen Design Week, a webinar series hosted by Decor Cabinets, a custom manufacturer of cabinetry in showrooms across North America. Today, I'm joined by Steve Bendel, our CEO, and we're going to be talking about how to scale your business and maintain culture at the same time. Steve, let's address some of the hesitations that owners would have when scaling their team and some of the different ways they can maintain their culture. I think when they're opening a new showroom or adding team members and they're looking to grow significantly, maintaining culture and keeping that same level of trust within their organization is one of their main concerns. How can owners manage this?
Yeah, I think one mistake owners often make is assuming that culture is going to preserve through history and legacy. I think you got to be very intentional about your culture. If you don't intentionally define it, it will define itself. And sometimes that can create problems for you. It needs to be managed just like any other operating system, and something that's not just a slogan, but something you intentionally focus on.
Speaking of intentionality, what are some of the ways that a manager can sort of guide the culture throughout their organization?
Well, I think it starts with clear direction of where the business is going. I think you've got to exhibit the right behaviors as you're managing an organization, but also intentionality about just your business practices. Who you hire can be a big part of that. And then also just leveraging some of the existing culture. You typically have your champions within the culture. You got to make sure that you're empowering those people to continue to influence it in a positive direction.
Speaking of adding new team members, what are some things that owners should look for when they're looking to expand their team and considering the culture and the hiring process?
Well, again, I think you've got to be very understanding of what that culture is and what's important to it. You want to look for folks that have the right characteristics or traits that complement that culture. Anytime you bring in new faces, whether that's, again, hiring to your existing team, whether that's expanding to new showrooms, it's very important that you understand what makes your culture, defines it, and then look for people that align with that. The last thing you want to do is bring in folks that have different visions and can, what we call, pollute your culture.
I remember the hiring process I experienced with Decor, and they did focus a lot about culture questions, a lot of soft skills questions, and also some aptitude, but also personality-based assessments. Would those tools be helpful for showroom owners as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those tools definitely help you glean like a person's personality, right? What's important to them, what excites them, what motivates them. Those are all key elements of a culture. When you have that intentionality about defining it, those are great tools to understand what gets people excited, what gets them motivated.
Yeah. And there's going to be different personality types that suit different roles better. And just finding that right culture fit depending on the needs of the position.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the ways to protect company culture would be to be intentional about it. What does that look like for owners? How do they make these decisions, and what are they looking for when they're protecting their culture?
Well, when you're talking about culture, I think it's important to understand it really gets defined by what do you tolerate, what's acceptable within your culture. Also, what sort of things do you reward as part of that?
We mentioned before that showroom owners or business owners in general will need to be intentional about their company culture. What does that intentionality look like? What are some of the things that they can implement to help maintain that culture as their business grows?
Yeah, I think there's three key elements that I think about when we're talking about intentionality of culture. And I think it starts with, what do you tolerate? What's acceptable? What's not? The second part of that is, what do you reward? So what are those things that you recognize and reward with your team? And then lastly to that, I think it has to do with, what do you prioritize when things get tough, right? When things are challenging, when you're in that growth mode or mindset, what are those things that rise to the top from a priority standpoint?
So speaking of tolerating, I think this would be just making sure there's consistency across the organization and what the expectations are, but also what the culture looks like. It's not just, a slogan. Like, companies put a lot of effort into creating their culture statements and their values to make sure those are maintained.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point you bring up, because again, that's what the intentionality is making sure that you understand and your team understands what's really important, right? And you got to treat it as more than just a slogan on the wall. It really needs to be part of your operating model, something that is clearly understood at all levels.
Would you recommend having performance expectations for culture? Speaking to what they would tolerate, like how do we create those clearer guidelines for owners to deliver to their team? Because I think it's quite difficult actually to try and maintain consistent standards. It's probably easier to maybe let some things slide. So how would we standardize this so everyone's on the same page in a growing organization?
Yeah, great question. I think it starts with clear expectations, making sure that everybody knows what those expectations are. They need to be documented. I think secondary to that, you've got to have clean and clear decision rights. So who has the right to make decisions, to change or influence things? Again, those things have to be very intentional, very well documented and understood.
Yeah, I think that would be important so that everyone's on the same page and we're not, they said this. And also in a growing organization, you have more and more levels of management, just making sure management is all on the same page. And then everyone that can be trickled down to designers and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that documented gives you that opportunity for consistency and always something to refer back to and measure yourself against.
I think in many organizations, employees like to be rewarded for the work that they do. They want to feel appreciated. How can you reward maintaining culture? What does that look like?
Well, rewards can be different for different individuals, right? Some people love public praise, others prefer, it done more in a private setting. You really got to know and understand your team to understand what is important to them as you're navigating that. But it starts with making sure that everybody sees that when something goes well, that you're as a standing up in front of them and acknowledging what went well. Again, that just kind of further cements this is what's important to us.
This behavior works, this culture doesn't work, and just making that more clear with what is being addressed and recognized as appropriate and maybe not so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's the flip side of that too.
Yeah.
I think it works both directions where, you want to reward the good behaviors. I think it's equally as important that if something doesn't meet the cultural expectations, that you address that, you address it immediately. And there's obviously, good ways to do that, right? With clear communication, timely is very important in that. Sometimes you got to be direct and just make sure that people understand how it does or doesn't fit into what you're trying to create there.
Yeah. Correcting what's not aligned and rewarding what is aligned.
Absolutely.
As showroom owners grow their business, there's a lot of different pressures that come from scaling. You talked a bit about what they prioritize under pressure. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important that the focus maintains on the team and the culture that you're trying to focus on. What becomes challenging at times is sometimes people are so focused on the metrics versus the culture. In my mind, certainly you can get the metrics short term, but if you lose sight of the culture, what's important, the metrics become all about what's driving your business. That's where it's very hard to maintain and preserve that culture.
Yeah, and I can see that creating a stressful environment too, where maybe the numbers are overvalued a little bit and the people start to not feel appreciated in a certain way.
Yeah, that's absolutely what happens in my experience, right? And I think, again, you can get some short-term results, but you may pay for it culturally in the long term if you're not continuing to preserve and intentionally maintain that balance. And again, under pressure, that's where it becomes difficult, right? When you're under a deadline, you're trying to hit a goal, whether it's financial or otherwise, you've got to make sure that you don't lose sight of the people side and the cultural side.
Yeah, it's better to reach those goals like with a good conscience and making sure the team is all reaching them together, and that further builds up the team culture and the morale within your team.
Absolutely. And in my opinion, it's much more sustainable at that point.
So we talked a little bit about hiring externally and what to look for in people who are new to the organization and in terms of maintaining that culture. How can we maintain culture within and growing the team by empowering people within the organization?
Well, I think the businesses that scale most effectively do exactly that. They're empowering people closest to the operation that they're trying to impact. It's very important that those people feel empowered. There's a common vision that they're working towards and a consistent operating model that they function within.
I think that would also give employees confidence that as we're growing, that's only making more opportunities available, not taking anything away or going in like a different scary direction.
Absolutely. I think they know they have some input in their own destiny, right? They have opportunities ahead of them. As the business continues to grow, it provides opportunities for them to grow along with it.
We talk a lot about culture, and I think showroom owners or business owners might have a bit of hesitancy to lean too far into their culture standards and maybe lose sight of the metrics because, as with any business and looking to scale, the metrics are important to focus on. Why is focusing on culture important, and how does that actually support your financial goals?
Yeah, so when we talk about, protecting culture, it doesn't mean resistance to accountability or business standards. In good organizations, adherence to those standards is actually a positive, right, to the team's mission and what they're trying to accomplish. So having that accountability, having that follow up, having that approach, balances those two out, but it's not absent in that recipe for sure.
Yeah. And you talked about sustainability before too, and how maintaining a strong culture can be a great foundation for sustainable growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you get too far the pendulum the other direction where you're avoiding accountability, that could obviously impact not only the metrics but the culture as well, because other team members end up carrying the load for those that may not be performing up to that standard you've set.
Right. And then you run into other problems like turnover and
Yeah.
bigger team issues other than maintaining it.
Absolutely. I think some of those key things to focus on, right, when you're measuring culture is, attendance, turnover. Obviously, there's different ways you can source for feedback from your team members as well. But usually those are the key indicators that tell you something's off or something's not quite right in your culture.
And you mentioned like getting feedback from your team members. And I think it's important to have that open communication and being able to have accountability, but also accepting feedback as an owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got to provide communication loops in various forms and fashions. Not all team members are comfortable sharing feedback directly, right?
Yeah.
So we like to think about what other avenues could we create, whether that's anonymous, whether that's surveys, whether that's suggestion boxes. There's different recipes that work for different people, but I think it is important that you balance out how do we allow for everybody to give their feedback, even those that may not feel comfortable always speaking up.
I think great communication also leads into building trust and protecting trust within a team, which is the foundation in the 5 dysfunctions of a team concept by Patrick Lencioni. That's something that we've went over in some of our trainings here at Decor, and we use that model to grow strong teams. I think, would you agree that protecting trust and having a strong team leads into a strong culture?
Absolutely. I think the team has to feel they're trusted and empowered, right, as part of that. And there's many layers to trust within an organization or a culture. I think it's that trust to know that I can openly communicate without any repercussions. I think it's got to be a trust in the leadership and the vision and where they're taking us, but also that personal and professional trust that if I speak up, my voice is going to be heard and somebody's going to do something about it. They're not only going to listen, but they're going to think about that. They're going to figure out how they can work through that and make things better as an organization or culture.
Right. And that just comes back to some of the other points we brought up, like what is being prioritized, what's being rewarded. And when everything is cohesive and working together, then that builds the trust and maintains a strong culture.
Absolutely. And I go back to that intentionality, those demonstrated traits that you exhibit. I think the team is always watching us as leaders to see how do we maintain during those difficult times, right? And those behaviors we exhibit certainly have a strong impact on defining our culture.
Do you have any tips for owners on how they would maintain that perspective? I think running a business and scaling, we mentioned that can be a stressful time. Do you have any tips on how to refocus and keep the focus on this consistency and intentionality?
I think it starts with visibility. I think, again, going back to that trust piece, if you're not visible in front of your teams, it becomes very tough or difficult for them to trust in you. I think the more visible you are to your organization and your team, they know you're in it with them, right? So it's not, again, just words on a wall. It's something that you're visibly demonstrating in front of them day in and day out.
It's active leadership.
Absolutely.
Like a passive person sitting in their boardroom.
Yeah.
you can't interact with. There's gatekeeping there.
Or some words on the wall, right? That don't really mean anything if nobody at the higher levels is demonstrating them every day in front of the team.
So we talked a little bit about culture. We addressed some metrics and how to balance those two things. What about the people aspect of it?
Yeah, I think the strongest organizations balance performance and humanity together, right? People will work incredibly hard through difficult times when they feel respected, they feel heard, they feel trusted, and they believe in the vision of where you're trying to take your organization.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're all people and I would hope that we all want to do a good job and that having that like natural drive to want to work towards that goal. I think it's easier to do that when there's a clear vision.
Absolutely. And I think it's as important that we treat people as people, right? Not just commodities, right, within our control, right, to achieve a goal or a bottom line. We want to treat them as human beings. I think you said it well. Most people come to work, they want to do a good job, they want to perform, they want to be successful, which is great in helping to generate a great culture.
And that's only going to help your business further when we're looking to scale. Like if you have really ambitious goals for metrics, having people who are also ambitious and wanting to help the company reach those goals, I think that only helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I think people will perform and a lot of times exceed your expectations when they feel empowered, they feel heard, and they're aligned to that common goal you're trying to achieve.
That's encouraging to hear, I think, for owners to, um, you know, address some of those fears when they're like, oh, I have to open a whole new location and I'm maybe nervous that it won't have the same culture as my original location. Maybe if they've been in the business for 35 years and they have a great team and now we want to expand and how do I maintain that great team? But just to be encouraged that maintaining this culture can actually drive results greater than what can be expected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a common fear there is, am I going to be spread too thin? Is it all on me as a leader? Again, I think that's why it's very important that people have ownership in the culture as well, right? They're not only there as part of it, but they help define it, they help preserve it, they help maintain it. They've got some ownership in what that culture looks like at the end of the day. As long as they have that common vision, I think people are typically going to help you drive in the right direction.
When showroom owners are scaling their business, conflicts are going to be a natural part of this process and will arise through different challenges. How can an owner preserve culture through conflicts either within their team or if there's just some tension during the growth process?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There is always going to be some conflict, especially when you're scaling and growing a business. I think I go back to you got to have that consistency in your leadership. You got to make sure that you're demonstrating what is good and what is expected of the team, right? You don't always want to shy away from conflict. And sometimes it's very important that you deal with that directly, right? And you can navigate through that. It's all about how you navigate through and what you demonstrate to the team, I think is going to resonate and help to define that culture.
More about how you go about it rather than always making the right call or the right decision, because sometimes during conflict, maybe you won't always make the right choice, but coming at it from a place of maintaining the culture and having integrity and intentionality through the process goes a long way.
Absolutely. I think another layer to that too, you've got to be willing to make some of those difficult decisions, right? That come along with managing through conflict and getting to a good place as an organization. And again, everybody's looking to the leadership team and how they navigate those situations. Even tied back to the accountability piece, I think it's important that you're consistent in that because the team's going to be looking for that as you navigate those tough times.
And I think during times of conflict, that's where it's even more important to have a foundation of trust within the team, because I'm sure owners will understand that sometimes these decisions during conflict can be maybe agonizing to make. Like you're really taking a long time to figure out what is the wisest decision here. And there may not always be a very clean cut answer. So having that foundation of trust within the team is really important for especially employees who may not understand the decision, or maybe they were really hoping for a different outcome. Having that foundation of trust is really important to create that consistency in culture, and having team members be like, well, maybe I didn't fully understand this choice, but I trust that this was the right decision and I trust the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why Lencioni references it as the foundation, right, of a good team and a functional team is that trust element. I think consistency, you mentioned that, is a key element of that. That's one of the things that the team is going to always look for. Are you consistent in your messaging? Are you consistent in your vision? Are you consistent in how you execute things across the organization, and especially in difficult times?
Well, Steve, thank you for joining us today and sharing some of your insights on how business owners can scale their business and maintain a strong culture at the same time.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time today. I want to encourage you folks that are out there considering scalability and growth. Don't be afraid of it. It all boils down to consistency, and it's very easy when you have the right structure around your culture to preserve those things as you're navigating those difficult waters.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us today. If you are interested in more professional development resources, the Decor Academy is a great next step. And be sure to check out all the Kitchen Design Week webinars. We have, I believe, 8 of them that you can go and check out and watch. So thank you for joining us.